All right. So we'll go ahead and call this work session to order on AR 2019-106, Energy Innovations and Carbon Dividend Act of 2019. We'll go ahead and start with introductions from Mr. Carlson.
Mr. Carlson is here.
Felix Rivera.
Gretchen Wenhoff. Susanna Brown.
Pete Peterson.
John Weddleton.
Dean Gates,
And my name is George Donner, D-O-N-A-R-T.
Thank you. And then Ms. Quinn Davidson is here, but not in the room right now. All right. Go ahead, Mr. Donner.
Okay. First, I wanted to thank you all for taking this time to just familiarize yourself better with this resolution, and also for putting this resolution forward, especially the people who Assemblyman Trainee and Constant for introducing this. I think it's very timely. I also think it goes along with the municipalities or the Assembly's unanimous decision to go forward on a climate action plan and draw that up, and also for considering taking climate action on a municipal level. I've been working with a group called Citizens Climate Lobby for a number of years, and this is the bill that we're asking the Assembly to endorse is one that we've been working for 8 or 9 years now to get introduced in the U.S. Congress. A little bit about Citizens Climate Lobby. We're an international group. We started in the United States, but Canadians immediately saw that it was a good idea too, and now we have chapters all over the world on every continent in the U.S. except Antarctica. We're nonpartisan, so we don't try and get people elected or kicked out of office. And we meet with when we go to Capitol Hill, we meet with 500 plus of the 525 offices there. We're nonprofit. We're very much volunteer driven. We're solutions focused. We're focused on the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. And we lead with respect, appreciation, and gratitude. And for that reason, we keep getting invited back into our offices of our members of Congress. And we've been having amazing discussions, not just with Congress, but with all kinds of other groups that want to weigh in on this. Like I said, we're volunteer driven. We have our goal is to have a chapter in every single congressional district, and we're really close to that. We're about 90% of the way there, and we work locally for a national solution on climate change. So a little bit about what's going on. Just to set the stage, we know climate change is real. 97%, some say even greater than that. Climate scientists say climate change is happening and humans are causing it. And that our window for action is very short. We need to take action right away, and it needs to be to scale as well, to actually do the job. Who else is saying that we need to take action? The military thing. This is a big problem. It's a risk multiplier, is the term that the military uses. Businesses are looking at the impacts and the risks going forward. Some of the risks that are pointed out in the resolution are ocean warming and ocean acidification, and this leads to seabird die-offs and other impacts on commercial fishing. We're seeing permafrost thaw throughout the state, which causes collapsing infrastructure and forced migration of people in rural communities. Our national security is threatened by major changes in the climate, as well as the security of fishermen's livelihoods and the security of rural travel. Unfortunately, we just lost some people recently falling through the Kuskokwim ice. Normally it's feet thick, but now it's just inches thick. This has an adverse effect on our economy. It's almost every single fisherman in the state is a small business person, and they're supporting families. We have increased wildfire risk. It's in Alaska, that risk has doubled in the last 30 years. So what we're asking you to do is do what's best for Alaska citizens, Anchorage citizens. The polling shows that Alaskans are very concerned about climate change, and that almost 3/4 of them would like to see CO2 regulated as a pollutant. So we know how to solve this problem. Basically, if you want fewer emissions, then level the playing field by making pollution expensive. Because right now, pollution's free, right? So it's a subsidy all the time. So we need to reduce that subsidy. So our solution is the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. There we go. It has four main parts: the carbon fee, the carbon dividend, which is similar to the permanent fund dividend, only it's paid every month, a border adjustment, and a regulatory pause on regulations. So basically, how it works is a fee is charged on fossil fuels at the source. That's the mine, the wellhead, or the port of entry. And all that money goes back to households as a dividend on a monthly basis. That fee would start out low, and it would grow over time. So initially the dividend would be smaller than it would be 15 years later. Going forward here. There we go. Carbon dividend would be, like I said, it's paid out every month. Equal shares. Adult gets a full share, kids get half a share. The border adjustment, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. It protects U.S. manufacturers and jobs and keeps us from exporting our pollution to other countries. And the limited regulatory adjustment, it has to do with it basically puts EPA's ability to regulate carbon dioxide only on a pause for 10 years, and then if after 10 years the goals set out in the legislation have not been met, then it mandates EPA to take action.
So before you keep going,
Yeah.
I have a question from Mr. Peterson.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so if they're going to be making these payments monthly, doesn't that add an additional cost and overhead to the program?
Yeah, initially that overhead would amount to about 4% of the fees. So, but that would decline over time. For one thing, the dividend would get larger, so that alone would make it smaller. But the initial startup would be basically you'd have to find more space. You'd need to buy computers, hire and train people, and set up the system, that kind of thing.
And so have they thought about maybe paying it quarterly instead of monthly?
That's been talked about too, but the reason they wanted to do it monthly was because that's when people's bills are due.
Okay.
They wanted to make sure that got covered. We're really trying to make it as focused on the public as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Go ahead, Mr. Donat.
Let's see. I was going to talk some more about the border adjustment. Basically, the way the border adjustment is, it creates a climate club. And the climate club is those nations which are taking major efforts to regulate carbon dioxide emissions. And if you're in the club, then you don't have to pay anything extra to get your goods into the United States. But if you're not in the club, then you have to pay extra, right, at the border. So it's not, so for instance, it wouldn't be to any country's advantage to not be in the club, but it would certainly be to their advantage to be in the club, because then they wouldn't be paying fees to the United States when they import or export to the United States. So that, since we're the largest trading country in the world, that's a big inducement to other countries to become part of this climate club. So that not only protects our jobs and keeps us from exporting our pollution, it also means that it increases the efforts on other countries as well. So what does the Energy Innovation Carbon Dividend Act do? Well, the first thing is, I think probably the most important thing is that it's effective. It's going to reduce our emissions 40% in the first 12 years. And it's also supported by economists and scientists. It's simple, comprehensive, effective. And another thing is it's also transparent, because it's because of the simplicity. We put these fees on at the mine wellhead or the port of entry, and everybody gets a chunk of the revenue.
So I have a question for
Yes.
Mr. Franks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would you speak a little bit more to that? I mean, how did you come up with the 40% within 12 years? Or how do we know that it'll be effective?
That's a good question. Within the bill itself, there are goals within the bill. And basically the way it works is if nationally we don't meet that goal, then the price goes up that year. So basic so following those goals, after 12 years, we'll be 40% below where we are today. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Franks. Go ahead.
It's good for people because, for one thing, air quality causes about 60,000 U.S. premature deaths every year, and sickens a whole lot more people. Mostly in the form of asthma. That's the most common problem with air pollution, and it's actually one of the most, considered to be one of the most important issues when people go to the polls. But it's also will be reduced markedly. It's been estimated that in the first 5 years of this program, that we will gain all the benefits simply in reduced pollution. So it'll pay for itself during those first 5 years. It also puts money in people's pockets, and they get to spend it as they see fit, and it helps low and middle income families. Somewhere between 2/3 and 70% of American families come out ahead or break even under this. Creates about 2 million jobs in the first 10 years, and so it'll be stimulating the economy. It's got bipartisan support, which I think is really important for getting something like this passed. Like I said, we've been working across, on both sides of the aisle for ever since our inception. It's been part of our DNA. And one of the things that we know from polling is that people like their members of Congress to work across the aisle. And they also want to take action on climate. Sorry.
All right, so I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
So first, Ms. Wimhoff.
One question is, did you say 2 million jobs?
Yeah, in the first 10 years, another 1 million jobs in the next 10 years.
From what?
All kinds of different things. For one thing, when people have more money in their pocket, they tend to spend it. Actually, first thing is on healthcare. So that would be an increase in employment in healthcare. But it's all part of a cleaner economy too. So it would also include things like jobs in things like, well, for instance, cleaning up or tightening up leaks in methane distribution systems, so natural gas distribution systems. It'll be installing renewable energy. It would be also making buildings more energy efficient. All those are things that are American jobs.
So, and that's in addition to the dividend, those jobs, the money that's
Yes.
coming from this goes to these programs and these jobs and this cleanup? No?
No,
Just
it's
the
because
dividend?
of the shift in how we are getting our energy.
Okay.
Um,
And so that would mean, I'm just being devil's advocate because I'm
That's
trying to
fine.
understand the logic.
No, I understand.
So the idea is, I'm getting money every month from
Mhm.
these oil companies, so I'm going to go buy another car.
Mhm.
So maybe I'll get some more money.
Yeah, but you'd be the one losing out, depending on what kind of car you bought. If you bought an electric car,
Well,
you'd be
but
you'd be
you see
you'd
what I mean?
be
I'm trying to
gaming the
figure out.
system.
This is the idea that then the companies aren't going to want to pay the tariffs is where you feeling this is going to work, not that the consumer is going to see the money as much as it. That was the question. So I'm finished.
Okay. And if I haven't explained something well enough, I'd be glad
I'm
to
just trying to understand. That's
talk
fine.
any other time. Yeah.
All right.
Is there another question?
Yes, I have a few. So, Mr. Constant.
Thanks. I came on as the sponsor. Mr. Trainee asked me to join, and this when Davidson asked some tough questions by email that I thought were really good. My question's about why and how we would put the dividend to the people instead of into investments for compounding the value of the renewable or the shift to alternative energies. But the question in there is, you made a statement that you think 2/3 or more of the benefits would accrue to people of middle to lower incomes. And how do you establish that? What is the mechanism of progressivity that would make that possible, that these benefits didn't just all somehow pile into buckets that are already full?
Well, because the benefits would come as a dividend, right? So what we know is that, and I'll get into that actually in just a few slides here, in rural Alaska as an example, but there's been a number of different economic studies that look at this, and including the Department of Treasury, their what's called Division of Tax Analysis, and they actually, they said 70 or the bottom 7 deciles would come out ahead or break even. And the basic idea is that people who have more money tend to have a larger carbon footprint. So if you're familiar with carbon footprint, so those people would not come out ahead. They would end up paying more in additional costs than they would get as a monthly dividend. Whereas people in lower income tend to have smaller carbon footprints. Therefore, their costs don't go up as much, but they still get an equal size dividend because everybody gets the same size dividend. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Constant, for raising that. I was going to actually ask about that, but George and I had quite a bit of email back and forth. And I think the truth is this is federal law. We're not going to change what they're planning to do based on our support or not. So I think overall I definitely support the idea, and contrary to Mr. Trainee's opinion, I believe in climate change, so I'm on board. I have a follow-up question for Mr. Trainee, particularly since it was your primarily you who worked on this, and Mr. Constant too. We of course been working at the municipality on a climate action plan, and we have expertise in-house. So have you worked with staff here, and what do they think about this?
Actually, I worked when we were dealing with the IM program years ago in the 90s. Been a problem here next because we see air quality. The feds mandated we had automobile inspections every year. to make sure we made our quality requirements. About 2000, we didn't have a problem anymore because we had people buying new cars. The fleet changed over out there. So you're asking whether the money can be spent to buy new cars. It gives us cleaner air. So I work with them to do that.
So have you
I'm
checked
the
with our
one to
staff,
repeal-
current staff about this?
I'm the one to repeal the IM program years ago.
Okay, that's good. So have you checked, you haven't checked with current staff? I'm just wondering, because we should maybe get their feedback before Tuesday if we haven't heard from them. Or do you have anything to
Well, that just raises the question, who on the staff is leading as a staff person for the climate action plan? 'Cause
Well, I
don't-
see Shayna Kilcoyne here. I think she is the lead, but I don't know if,
And so then that might be a good person to hear from here now. 'Cause
Would be
just
good.
while we're here, I mean.
Good idea,
Okay.
Austin.
So, if we have any questions for Shana now, then we can go ahead and just do that.
I don't know if Shayna's prepared, I mean, I have no idea, but.
So do we have questions for Shana?
Well, I guess how I'd like to see things on the assembly happen, if possible, is we have experts in-house. So if we're gonna propose things, I would like to know what the experts think about it. I think, that's just a good way to do things. So I
Got
just
it.
want,
So-
I don't know that I have specific questions for Shayna. I mean, I'd like to know what do community staff think about this? Is it consistent with our climate action plan? Is it a good idea? But she may or may not have no idea if she's prepared to respond to that.
So are you prepared to address those
Just a point
questions?
of order. I mean, that's getting, he's about halfway. It might be better.
Sure, we can do that
Criticism,
after.
And then she would come up.
Yep,
and just
sure,
do
that's a
that.
good idea.
Okay, all right, we'll do that.
Thanks, Tony.
All right.
Yeah, figure it out. Thanks,
Cool,
guys.
so then I'll just later. All right, so then going back in order, Mr. France.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering if you could just summarize the nuts and bolts of how this works, since the producer gets charged at the source. So up here it would be the oil companies, and presumably that cost would be passed on to folks at the pump, and then they would receive a dividend. But
Yes.
and that's basically how it would work. Just
Yeah.
the oil companies would pay, and then the consumer down the road.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the major part of it. The complex part is figuring out the border adjustment. But they do that already in the sense that they're always trying to figure out, whether another country is dumping. So they have economists working in the Commerce Department all the time trying to figure out, all the details of that type of thing. So they'll be able to do that as well.
Okay, thanks. That's all
Yeah.
for me.
Thanks, Mr. France. All right, so we have two more questions, then back to you, Mr. Donor. So Mr. Gates, then Mr. Train.
Yeah, thank you. When I saw this was called a claim that had bipartisan support, I was a little skeptical. I like to be accurate, so I looked this up. HR63 on Congress.gov. It doesn't have Fitzpatrick and Schwab here as co-sponsors. It has, can you verify?
Yeah,
Yes,
okay,
I guess
okay.
be accurate. Because on Congress.gov it says there's one Republican co-sponsor.
Yeah.
And 26 Democrat co-sponsors.
Right.
So if we want to call it bipartisan and like some accuracy,
okay.
could you verify
Yes, okay.
that there's actually
Okay.
bipartisan support?
This was when this was originally introduced, which is at the very end of the 115th Congress. It was co-sponsored by 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans, and then it was reintroduced much earlier than we had anticipated in the new Congress. And at that point, the Republicans that were interested in being co-sponsors hadn't organized themselves that much. So Congressman Rooney was the and Congressman Deutsch were the two that introduced it in Congress originally. Now we've been gained a number, another 24 Democrats on the to co-sponsor the bill. We're feeling sure that we're going to get a number of other Republicans as well. They're just talking about it, and they're waiting for the right time to do it. That's basically what's happening right now.
A little follow-up. Do you have any position from the Alaska Congressional Delegation on this?
Well, we talk to them fairly often, but one of the things we know is that climate is a very touchy issue. So when we talk to them in meetings, we keep that private, and because that we want to have good ongoing discussions with them. We don't want them to, kind of be talking out of school, that kind of thing. We can talk about what their public positions are. I know Senator Murkowski publicly has been speaking out quite a bit about climate change. Both Congressman Young and Senator Sullivan have been talking about the dangers of ocean acidification and wanting to take action in that realm as well. But as far as they have not, Congressman Young is not a co-sponsor on this yet, but we are definitely asking him to do so on a regular basis.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. Mr. Train.
Just that somebody needs to get involved in the issues facing not only our city, but our country and our world. Because right now, we've seen so much climate change in our lifetime. Like I said, I used to take my kids down to Portage Glacier. They've been riding icebergs down. They've been able to do that for the last 20 years. We know global warming is happening. And for example, a few years ago, I'm older, they put something called NTBE in our gasoline. And I asked the EPA, what's the justification for doing that in cold weather environment? They had never done any cold weather testing. So I introduced an ordinance to get it out of our gas here. And if you look at the Anchorage Times, which is a newspaper we had here, they did a whole article how the EPA was going to send me to jail for getting rid of NTB in our gas. We got rid of the gas. I didn't go to jail. I could have written a good book to be in jail. But every now and then, it's nice when we can take stance on issues of facing not only us, but our children and our grandchildren. Because we're not going to be here forever in this world. It's heating up. But I'm really worried about the environment we're going to have.
Thank you, Mr. Train. I hope we get a chance to read that book someday. Go ahead, Mr. Dillon.
Jail them.
You hope that he ends up in jail. He is going off the assembly, so maybe he'll have a little bit of time.
Yeah, maybe you don't have to go to jail right
Anyway, the last point I wanted to make about the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act was that it's revenue neutral, which means that the money isn't used to grow the size of government. Everybody gets to use the money to spend how they choose. So it avoids that whole how big should the government be argument. So to talk a little bit about rural Alaska, this was a concern that was brought up by our members of Congress. The Institute for Social and Economic Research, Dr. Colt, did a study to find out what happens in these three areas in the Kuzelbach, Bethel census areas and the Northwest Arctic Borough, which have the highest rates of poverty and the highest fuel expenses in the state, and found out that people in rural Alaska come out ahead, that their increased expenses, which would include everything from direct purchases of fuel to increased costs of electricity to shipping, airplane flights, increased costs of things at the stores, whatever, and a lot of the public buildings. People still come out ahead by quite a wide margin. British Columbia has had a revenue neutral carbon tax similar to this, and what they found was they reduced the amount of fuel usage by almost 20% compared to the rest of Canada without having much, without affecting their GDP, and almost 2/3 of people there approve of their carbon tax. It was so popular that the whole of Canada now has a carbon pricing mechanism that is starting at very similar to ours. It rises $10 per ton per year. It's also been endorsed by these cities as well as hundreds of other ones too. I just picked a few off the top of my head, and it's been endorsed by the National Presbyterian. I was hoping our Presbyterian minister would be here to.
Kurt's here. And here.
Oh, Kurt's here. Okay, so tell who was it? The Presbyterians who?
Yeah, the Presbyterian Church USA has been very concerned about this issue for years and been looking into ways to be effective in addressing it. And so in 2018, they had addressed the fee and dividend.
Sir, could you do me a favor? Could you stand up just so the record can get
sure.
you clearly? And then could you also identify yourself for the record, please?
Glad to. Yeah, I'm Reverend Curtis Carnes with the Presbytery of Yukon of the Presbyterian Church USA, and I live in Eagle River. So the Presbyterian Church USA, of which I'm a part, and a couple others here in the room are part, been very concerned about climate change and needing to deal with it in a timely way. We found in our research that one of the best ways, the most effective, immediate things to do that would be a fee and dividend approach. We like the revenue neutral fee and dividend approach because it's effective. They know the marginal effects of raising the cost of carbon. They have a lot of research on that and experience with that over the last years, so they can look at that. The studies have been extensive on it. But what we love about it is it also tries to shield the poorest through the dividends so that they're not affected. And yet they're not affected inappropriately, yet it's effective in bringing this down. For us, as we look at creation, we see it as a sacred thing. Our documents talk about desecrating God's creation by not dealing with the environment, which means that we see it as sacred. Desecrating assumes a sacredness. And so this is an approach that we've said that would be the most immediate and effective way going forward. So we endorsed it in 2018 as a national body.
Thank you. Yeah. Also, we just found out that the U.S. Council of Catholic Bishops has endorsed it. It's actually been to Washington, D.C., and has been lobbying on it just in the last couple of weeks. Economists agree on carbon pricing. There's what's called the Economist Statement on Carbon Dividends, and it's been signed by all these people that you see here, the 4 former chairs of the Federal Reserve, 27 Nobel laureate economists, 15 former chairs of the Council of Economic Advisors, and 2 former secretaries of Treasury. And some of the highlights of it are that they're united in saying that carbon tax offers the most effective lever to reduce carbon emissions at the scale and speed that's necessary, and it should increase every year, like ours, until goals are met, and be revenue neutral. Some other people who are, have been endorsing this, Dr. James Hansen, one of the most famous climate scientists in the world, he says, in this quote, he's talking about how the price should rise continuously, and that the funds should be returned to American households. George Shultz, who was Treasury Secretary and Secretary of State under President Reagan, argues for neutrality because it doesn't increase the size of government, but it levels the playing field. Francis Rooney, who was one of the co-sponsors, says we need to let the free market deal with helping to change over the way that we generate electricity and use our energy. And finally, Keegan Randall is also in favor of this. So it was, and so I wanted to thank you all for letting us talk about this and for also bringing this up, because I think that the endorsing this, I think, helps give the municipalities leverage in moving climate action forward. It complements other actions that the municipality is taking, like the Climate Action Plan. It helps create political will with our members of Congress. It helps them also have backing for taking climate action. And it acts as a model for other communities in the state, and the Alaska Municipal League and the Alaska Council, I think it's called the Council of Mayors. And it allows us to leverage our efforts towards reducing climate impacts at a scale larger than just the local scale. And it's going to, passage of national legislation is going to make it easier for Anchorage to reach its own goals and help us to live with the least impact and be ready for the future. I also think it's the right thing to do. And I think that the more people stand up, the faster we get there. So I wanted to thank you very much for, if there's any more questions people have.
Yeah, we got some questions. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Donor. Mr. Constant.
Thanks. So, we heard a lot about this general idea of a carbon tax and a dividend, but we didn't see any numbers. And I imagine numbers are complex to address in a sense of the abstract. But when I think of the average Alaskan, or even a average rural Alaskan, what are we talking about on a monthly dividend? Did I miss that slide?
No, that's fine.
And what are we talking about in the cost on goods and services generalized across what we have today? Startup costs, if you will.
Well, first of all, here's some numbers. I don't know if you can see those up there or not.
Maybe you could, give it one, at least one
I can
section.
try and make it a little bigger than that. Try, but might not succeed.
You hit your command plus button. On
Oh,
your
here we go.
keyboard?
Here we go. Now it's as big as it gets. I'm sorry that I can't make this.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, I can say in the first year, the annual dividend it would be $275 approximately, and the dividend would peak in about 15 years at $1,300 per person, and then it would go down slowly for about 35 years until it zeroes out. And
So we're talking about $400 billion at the peak, right? So 300 million times 1,300.
yeah, about $415 billion.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big problem.
No, I get that. I just
Yeah.
wonder what that does to the cost of goods and services. It's hard for me to imagine how that's not harmful to people living in very unusual places that don't have high streams of resources and local energy and all of that.
Let me see if I can pull up. I do have a good slide that will show that. I mean, one of the nice things about the report that Dr. Colt did was that he has actual figures in there, and would it be? Could I?
That's fine.
Yeah, get those figures to you.
That's fine.
Sorry, I can't
I
put
don't
my
want to slow
finger
the
on it
train,
right
but
now.
I want to see where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah, no, I
Would you like
understand
to
that.
address it just conceptually? So there's $400 billion leaving the.
Sorry, could you stand up and then state your name for the
My
record?
name is Scott Grund. I'm with CCL, Citizens Climate Lobby, and also with the Alaska Climate Action Network. And I was helping out with the municipality's climate action plan. And just on a conceptual basis, yes, there's $400 billion extra that trickles through the economy, not just when you're at the gas pump, not just when you're paying your monthly bill for heating or electricity, but also all the other goods. That totals the $400 billion. And that same amount of money comes back out into the economy through these rebates. So although it increases the price of a good, you're also increasing the amount of money that someone has to pay for that good. So on a net basis, it would be a wash to a family, but better than that, it gives the family the choice to use less energy-intensive sources of energy. Like right now, I don't know if it's cheaper for me to buy some juice that's frozen concentrate, or if it's more effective for me to buy the juice that doesn't require as much refrigeration during shipping. So which of those is better for the economy? I don't know. But as soon as this would hit, it would be very clear to the consumer just by looking at the price of things, and then the consumers choose something that's less expensive, less invasive on the environment. So on a conceptual basis, it's not hurting the economy. We're not taking money out of the economy. We're just that this plan more fairly addresses the hidden costs associated with burning fossil fuels.
And to give you some numbers here, this is a graphic that shows basically the difference between the dividend for a household of 4 in the Kuzelbach census area, which is basically the lower Yukon, which is where I fish commercially. And it shows that the additional fees, that they would be paying, or costs for flying and for air freight, and for freight in general, would be about $75 more per year. The increased costs of goods at the store would be about $42 a year. This is just in year one. The fee for public buildings like clinics and things like that would be about another $65 a year. Electricity prices or costs would go up about $75 a year. Heating would go up about $150 a year, and ground and water transportation would be about another $80 per year. So all those extra costs per year would be about $475, as opposed to a dividend of $875. So there's about a $400 savings there. Does that help?
It just raises more questions. First, can you share with us this ICER study so
Yes.
we can see it firsthand?
Yes.
And then, so your $876 is, I guess this is based on a family of 3? Because you said the first year number would be $275?
It'd be a family of 4.
Okay, so the numbers just don't round out the same.
He did this in 2015, and the estimates of what the actual dividend would be on that year has gone down about 8% or something like that from what it was originally. But still, people still come out.
The question of what happens is population increases and every individual gets money, but I guess it's based on consumption, kind of, but it's also based on overall production and need and economy. And some people do it less and some people do it more. Anyhow, it just raises some more questions than I have answers for right now.
Well, so to get at that, I think the important thing to recognize is that in the economy, there's a billion different economic decisions that are made every day, right? And if this price is built into that decision, that's going to shift the direction that those economic decisions get made.
I got to keep this moving along. Thank you, Mr. Constant. So just keeping track of time, we have about 10 minutes. I have 4 people in the queue, and then I do believe we wanted to see if Ms. Copeland had any, I think some questions for her. So Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions also have to do with costs, which may be answered by some of the ICER information.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just thinking through the issue of the consumers and who are the big consumers, possibly some of the commercial users. and they would not be getting a dividend.
Right.
And so that's why the individuals, even though prices would likely go up at the pump, would presumably many of them be getting more than what they're paying in those costs. And that $400 billion collected would of course be minus the cost to administer the program, so it would be slightly less than that amount. But in just one question then, wasn't there an oil company that contributed like $1 million recently to
Actually,
moving this
both
forward?
both Exxon and Exxon contributed $1 million to an effort similar to this. It's an effort. It's a proposal put out by the Climate Leadership Council, which was has a lot of large corporate sponsors, and so Exxon put out $1 million towards what they call their carbon dividend plan, and it has the same four aspects of that plan that are in the Energy Innovation Carbon Dividend Act. But the details are different. For instance, the price starts higher, but it doesn't grow as quickly. That kind of thing. It does include all the money going back as a dividend. And so it was Exxon gave $1 million to that effort, and ConocoPhillips $2 million to that effort recently. And a lot of the oil companies, especially European oil companies, have been in favor of regulating carbon emissions through carbon taxes, because it's something that they build into their business model. It's something they can predict. You know, businesses like stability, right? They want to have a stable business climate. So, for instance, the BP and as far as I know, all the operators, from the big oil companies do this. They have an internal carbon price. So they know something like this is coming down the line. They don't want to be caught flat-footed. Their investments are for 20, 30 years at a time. They want to make sure that they're protecting themselves and their stockholders, so they build in that price. They aren't going to take a proposal to Houston to get it approved unless they can show that proposal will make money for the company with a high carbon price in it. Right now, BP is using $85 a ton. According to, we have a member who used to actually put together projects for them, and that's what I've also heard from people who work for Exxon as well. That's kind of the standard price that they're aiming at.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Go ahead, Mr. Gates.
Oh, thanks. Two things quickly. There's a public hearing set for this Tuesday night. I just want to remind you all. And second, I heard you mention the Alaska Municipal being consolidated. What you said about building.
Oh, that doing this would be a model for other municipalities within the state. Yeah.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. Mr. Trini.
George, thanks for being here. We appreciate your presentation. Thanks so much for your time. And just anybody that cares about this, it's item 14K on the agenda on the 9th. So you'll have the ability to come and testify. You have about 3 minutes longer for this question. Should be somewhere, I think, around 8 or 9 o'clock, so the chair. But that's what's scheduled.
That's always good to know. I've been to assembly meetings, and you get there at 7, and it's 11 o'clock, and you still haven't had yet. So I'm hoping that 8 or 9 o'clock is accurate.
Good luck with that.
Yeah.
You can always change your organization.
It's not up to the chairman.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Trini. Ms. Monmouth.
To the public.
Yeah.
I'm just clarifying one, and then I have a question. So the 800 in that model that you showed us about rural Alaska, kind of 876 a year, but it would be paid in smaller monthly payments, and that would be the total. Okay, I just want to clarify that,
Yes.
because I think sometimes when we're making decisions, there's a whole bunch of stuff, and we end up in the weeds. But unfortunately, or fortunately, the weeds are what we need to sell to the people that are trying to figure out what's going on.
Sure.
And so, in that sense, determining who receives this is based on, and you don't have to be totally in the weeds, but how do you base who receives it, i.e. age group, family unit, IRS status? How do you figure who gets it?
Anybody who has a taxpayer identification number, or social security number,
So a
gets it.
14-year-old could get it? They have a social
They would,
security number?
yeah, well, even, yeah, and a 14-year-old would get a half a share as a dependent.
Okay.
Yeah. But when you turn 19, then you get a full share.
Why 19, not 18?
Um,
In the weeds, I know, but-
it's just in the bill that way. They wrote it
Okay.
that way.
Okay, so it's beyond just the family, it's every individual in the country.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, and it's based solely on age?
Age would be you get half a share if
I
you're
mean,
younger.
the 30-year-old is going to get it no matter how much taxes, how many.
Right. Everybody gets the same size
Okay.
dividend, just like the permanent fund, except kids only get a half a share.
Okay.
Because their kids' carbon footprint is smaller than an adult. Right?
Just trying to find words to sell it if I
No,
keep
that's
asking questions.
Yeah. No.
Thanks, Ms. Webb. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm thinking about how they're going to come up with who pays how much tax. For example, I was thinking about the oil produced in the tar sands in Alberta is by far one of the more expensive and polluting ways that you can get oil. And so would they end up paying a higher carbon tax, or how are they planning to adjust or something?
You know, I have to tell you, I'm not certain about how they would determine different kinds of fuels that are entering the United States at a port of entry. That I don't know if I know that there are people who know that, who've actually done that kind of research. And I do know that, for instance, because the fee is based on how much carbon dioxide is released when it is burned.
I see.
That might not be captured.
So they may not be taking into account how much carbon is burned when they're producing it?
If it's an imported fuel, yes. But as far as, you know, if you're paying for the fee at the minor wellhead, then it's going to capture most of the costs of refining and all that, and transportation, all those kinds of things.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, we're trying to capture as much of the carbon dioxide that's produced as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. All right, so seeing no other questions, I will go ahead and ask Ms. Kilcoyne if she could come up. So, Ms. Kilcoyne, does this fit within the climate action plan that we've adopted, and do you have any opinions on it?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is aligned with the draft Anchorage Climate Action Plan. We do have an action that is to evaluate the carbon pricing mechanism to account for the externalities of fossil fuels. So this is absolutely in alignment. And I will add that on our advisory committee, we had we had a representative from BP, and when we talked about this, she said, yeah, absolutely, BP is interested in the energy transition, and shared their global strategy for how they will play a part. And part of that says, we believe that carbon pricing is the most effective, comprehensive, and efficient way to incentivize everyone to play their part in reducing carbon emissions, which is something Mr. Donner mentioned.
Thank you. And since he is here, Mr. Mayor, did you have anything you wanted to add on this?
No, but thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. All right. Okay, so thank you, Ms. Kilcoyne. Do we have any questions for? Sure.
Sure. I just wanted to thank Shayna and also thank both of you for bringing this forward and for doing the work session, because I think this was super helpful discussion, and I just appreciate it. So look forward to supporting it.
All right. Thank you. All right, so before I close this work session, so I understand that the body wants to have another work session after this upcoming one on Mr. Dyson's resolution. In order for us to have this work session after this Dyson work session is completed, I have been advised by Ms. Jones that we need to go back, reopen the ACDA work session, and do the motion to have a time specific. So that's what I'm going to do as soon as I close this work session. I'm going to reopen ACDA, just do a quick motion to have it after the 2 to 3 p.m. work session, close that one, and then start the 2 p.m. work session.